It is another episode of JC Unplugged, and I don't think it needs an introduction. He's there on the screen right now. It's Jeff Timmons from 98 Degrees. What's going on, buddy?
How you doing, man? Congratulations on the show. I'm so excited for you, although I'm not surprised at all.
Thank you. Thank you, dude. You're such a good friend, man. I appreciate that. And it's really cool because you and I have done many things before in the past, and I'm really looking forward to going long form and be able to chat with you for the next hour and kind of going deep in your career and just learning more about you.
Amazing, man. Thanks for having me. You're always so good to me, and I love the opportunity to talk about what we've got going on. So thanks a lot for taking the time today. I appreciate it.
Well, let's go back to the beginning, right? So you're in college studying
Yep.
psychology. And
Well,
what happens that makes you leave college and decide to pursue your singing career?
kind of studying psychology. I was in school and that was my major. Studying is the operative word there. Honestly, I come from a very small town in Ohio. It's a football town, Massillon, Ohio. It's right by where the Football Hall of Fame is. Literally, when you're born, they put a football in your crib if you're a boy. And the town revolves around sports. And I grew up in sports, playing football, wanting to play football in college, but was always drawn to the arts. And the arts where I was from was not really that cool and had bounced around from small college to small college trying to play football. Ended up not, I ended up having to come to the realization that I'm not that good. And like I have to finally finish my degree. So I ended up transferring to my fourth college, Kent State University, wasn't playing sports there, ran into some guys I went to high school with, ended up crashing at their apartment, living there. And basically at a party one night, some girls were talking about these guys and how good they were at singing, and they wouldn't give us the time of day. So I was like, guys, you want to really try to impress these girls, as a 19 or 20-year-old guy would do, and found three guys that said they could sing. We went into the bathroom. I parted out an a cappella version of My Girl, went out, we sang it for them. Whether it sounded good or not is debatable. I thought it sounded good.
Huh?
They thought it sounded good, paid attention to us. But honestly, it was kind of a revelation to me. I don't know whether I had too many beers that night or what, or it was the attention from the girls. But I was like, man, this is kind of cool. I had become a fan of Boys to Men and was really intrigued by their career. And I was like, wow, maybe we could be like a Boys to Men kind of thing. And literally on a whim and on the fly, decided to quit school and focus on starting a singing group that night. Believe it or
All
not.
based on this performance of My Girl. You're at a party. You
Yeah.
decide to sing for some girls, all based on the reaction you got from the ladies that night. You decide to, hey, mom and dad, I'm quitting school and I'm going to LA based on last night's party.
That's literally what happened. And I called my mom that night.
Oh, you did?
And yeah, I called her. And that was when the phones were still connected to the wall. A lot of people won't understand what that means. You didn't have cell phone. So I called her and I said, Mom, I think I'm going to start a singing group. Like, I think this is it. She's like, you obviously had too much to drink. If I tell your father, he's going to lose his mind. But ultimately, without telling them, I quit school and bought a keyboard and, started working on music and trying to part out different songs, Boys to Men songs. All for One, if you remember, that group had just emerged on the
Yeah.
scene. Doo-wop groups, all these vocal groups. I literally spent every day while the other guys were attending class, like working on these breakdowns of harmonies and started like seriously rehearsing with these guys. I mean, everybody that I knew thought I was absolutely insane. And probably if you look back at it, it probably was a little on the crazy side.
Well, those girls that you sang for that night, did you end up like hooking up with them, hanging out with them? Do they know the impact? Because what if you were walking out there and you're like, My Girl, and they're like, oh my God, who are these losers?
Well,
What if
look,
they didn't react the way they reacted?
yeah, I mean, that was the risk. But obviously, we had liquid courage. We had some beers, and, everybody thought, well, they're not paying attention to us anyway. We might as well go out there and give it a shot. No, they liked it. It actually did sound good, which is what was surprising to me. These guys I had never sung with, learned the harmonies really quickly. They ultimately became my first group. And you didn't have the luxury of having the kind of communication and technology that we're experiencing, exchanging right now stories with. You just had to go to places where the scene was. And at that time, it was LA, New York, or Nashville for country. And literally a couple of months later, we picked up, drove across the country with, no connections. With the intentions of, getting a record deal and getting signed and getting discovered. That's how it started.
Have you ever thought of going back or did you go back and get your degree? Did you ever finish?
I think my parents wanted me to get my degree, and I've looked it up a couple of times. What was interesting about it is none of my credits, although I was nearly ready to graduate back then, none of my credits are still there. Like as the years have gone by, I've got like I'd have to really pretty much enroll in school again. I've thought about it just to kind of get the degree. I've looked into some online classes, but at this point, I'm so busy, man. I just don't think I have time to do it. It'd be
Yeah.
great to have that under my belt, and I'm sure my folks would have been happy that I did that, but I think they're all right with what's happened for me
You're
so
happy with
far.
your success. I got a buddy that was kind
Yeah.
of in the same situation as you. He was getting ready to graduate, and he had to take one class, 3 credits, but he had to wait to the fall to take it. But they still let him walk and do the whole thing with his family in the spring, with his friends and everything. So he walked. It was in spring, and he never went back and finished that one class. So literally, here we are. This was 1998, 1999, and he is technically has not graduated from UNLV. Everyone thinks he has, but he was literally
Yeah.
one class shy of officially getting his degree, and he's never gone back to get it.
He faked the funk. That's amazing
Big
that he got
time.
a chance to do that. Look, I thought about it a couple of times, but I'm like, wow, I mean, do I have time to do this? I mean, no, I actually don't have time. But I'm sure that, probably my folks would be more proud of that if I ended up doing it than any of the accomplishments.
They're performing on
what,
stage with Mariah Carey. It's like,
do you have your bachelor's degree in psychology? No.
So
Sorry, I
you
failed.
and these buddies, you guys moved to LA. What happens next? You're out there hustling as a group. Do you have a name for you guys? Are you
Yeah,
98
yeah.
degrees then?
Well, we originally we kind of were screwballs, and we didn't really take it that seriously as collectively. I did, they didn't, and we were called the Four Tools.
Really?
Just the Four Tools. And then we met a producer in Northern California that said, "Why don't you call yourselves?" Because we were just a collection of misfits at that point. They were like, "Why don't you call yourselves Just Us?" So we were going around calling ourselves Just Us, which is a terrible name for a group. And when we got to LA, basically because we didn't have any instruments, any money, we walked around singing a cappella anywhere and everywhere for food, for money. We dropped a hat. I mean, we went to Third Street Promenade in Northern California. We went to Fisherman's Wharf. We would drop the hat for money. People would pay us, give us good money, but of course we'd go spend it on booze and food and, have nothing to show for it, as a 19, 20-year-old guy would do. And eventually we ended up connecting with some people that worked with James Brown, the legendary James Brown.
Really? Okay.
Went to sing for James Brown. He really liked us and wanted to sign us to his sub label at the time. And ultimately we didn't sign with him because they're right around the holidays. The rest of my group went home and they quit. They got scared.
No.
Yeah, they got scared, and they were, it was too real, too fast, and it was happening. It was going to happen, and they kind of just said, "Hey, it's not for us," sorry. But after getting reinforced with, the energy from people we were singing for, just the self-belief that I had in something that really didn't exist at that time outside of Boys to Men. It was all grunge at that time. I thought there was something there. So I stuck with it. I got a job, I worked security, and ended up starting to put ads in papers to audition people when I wasn't working. And believe it or not, LA, that's supposed to be the bevy of entertainment and talent, I couldn't find anybody in LA that fit the mold for what I was looking for in the group. It was pretty crazy.
So I want to go back to it. So Just Us is the name?
That was the name. Yeah, that was the original name.
Did you meet James Brown? He was alive back then, right? You met James Brown then?
Well, obviously he was alive if we met him.
I don't know, maybe
a dead James Brown wouldn't have done much for us.
Maybe he started the label and it was the James Brown Foundation or something.
Gotcha. No, he was very much alive. I mean, yeah. So we sang a cappella for him in his office.
Were you nervous walking in?
Oh my God. Oh, of course. Absolutely.
How's that?
It was nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
I mean, here all of a sudden, we're screwing around singing for $5, $10, $100 and getting ushered into clubs in LA because it was kind of a funny, cool thing to see a bunch of guys singing a cappella. And then all of a sudden we're in front of the legendary James Brown. I mean, James Brown is the godfather of soul. He's changed music, R&B music, and had his own niche. And so, to sit in front of him, and just the buildup, the security guy that introduced him to us was like, "Look, when you go see James Brown, don't look him in the eye. You call him Mr. Brown." Yeah, it was serious business. You call him Mr. Brown. You don't make any jokes. Don't address him unless he addresses you. So on top of singing for him in live and in the flesh, we were really nervous about the rules and not screwing up and not getting kicked out. And here, we're from a really small town. So James Brown to us is somebody you watch on TV or listen to your parents' records, to see him in person there. It was quite nerve-wracking, but we pulled it off. He liked what we did, wanted us to go. He was about to tour Southeast Asia and wanted us to go with him to Vietnam and sign us to his label, which was under Scotty Brothers, which is like a label that existed back then.
Mhm.
But, after that, I was super excited, high-fiving the air, because the guys I was with, they were like petrified. They were like, no, man. They're like, wow, this is really crazy. We were doing this for fun. And I'm like, no, we're in LA. Like, we're out
Yeah,
here to
this
do
is the
this
real
for
deal.
real. Yeah, exactly.
I want to put a pause on that where we are in your timeline. I would jump ahead because I do have a question because you triggered something. When you guys made it big as a band and everything, did you ever have any rules when it came to meeting your fans or anything? And I ask this because, during my time in radio, we did stuff with Avril Lavigne, and they always said, Avril Lavigne does not like to be touched. Don't shake her hand. Keep your distance. And I completely respected that. This was in Washington,
Absolutely.
D.C. She's there. She comes backstage. It's like Avril Lavigne is like, hi, how are you? She puts her hand out to shake my hand, and I'm like, I step
You
back.
didn't know what to do.
I didn't know what to do. I wanted to shake it, but they told me not to, so I didn't know what to do. Did you ever have any rules once you guys became successful as, hey, don't do this with us?
Well, for us, no, we really didn't. That's kind of one of the things that we kind of prided ourselves on. We're kind of a blue collar group, or a group that works really hard. We didn't have some of the machine and energy that the other groups had. Like, we weren't signed to Jive Records. We were signed to Motown, which is a legendary label, but had a completely different infrastructure. We didn't have a Lou Pearlman or a Johnny Wright. It was pretty much us with a bunch of guys that really didn't know how to promote or market a group like us. So what we did was, hey, we're going to work harder than everybody else. We're going to do everything that's asked of us by the media, by radio, by TV, by retail. And most importantly, we're going to be accessible to the fans. We want them to feel like they're our friends because they're supporting our career. It didn't happen overnight for us. It happened fast.
Mm-hmm.
But we released a record that wasn't promoted very well. In fact, Motown didn't want people to know that we were white. They wanted people to think we were an R&B group. So they didn't put our pictures on anything.
Really?
They didn't really want to promote us like that. So when we would show up at radio shows with Ice Cube and Too Short and LL Cool J, people were like, "You guys aren't 98 Degrees." We're like, "Yeah, we are." So here we are, guys. And so whatever they were trying to do, it kind of backfired within the industry. So we had to go out there and find ways to keep the momentum going when we had a single out. So we went out there and did a lot of grassroots promotion, wrapped a Winnebago with our picture on it, an RV, drove into different regions, handed out our own swag, sang a cappella still, and, tried to gain momentum. And it wasn't until we went up into Canada and drove into Canada when Backstreet Boys were emerging there. We drove to their concert venues where they were selling tickets to their shows and sang for their fans. And then ultimately Much Music, which is their version of MTV, put us on TV. And when that happened, we exploded in Canada, took that momentum, went to Southeast Asia, exploded in Southeast Asia, and then circled back to the US after we had a little bit of momentum.
So wait, so you would go to Canada to a Backstreet Boys concert, be out like in a parking lot singing for their fans?
Yeah, we went to where they were selling tickets to their shows. So the girls were camped out at these different venues waiting to buy tickets.
Yeah.
And we got the label. They didn't drop us yet, thank God. We got the label to pay for an RV, which we drove ourselves. We would take shifts driving around. We drove up into Canada and went to these venues. And when they were camped out waiting for tickets, we'd get out. They'd see this big RV with what looked like, what's now called a boy band. We were a vocal group, but we got out and sang for them a cappella. Girls would come up, and it wasn't like you could give them your Instagram or anything. We would hand out cards, like cards with our pictures on it, where they could fill out their mailing addresses and stuff like that. We collected our own mailing database. And then, we would go to the next city, and eventually, they put us on television there. When Much Music interviewed us, all of a sudden we couldn't get out of our RV the next city we went into. All of a sudden we became very popular.
That's incredible. And
it's a lot different than people think.
You talk about being an accessible band. I remember one of the first things I did, and when I got to Washington, D.C., I did radio in Las Vegas, and I went to Washington, D.C. for a little bit. We had a competition where a local high school that won got to have 98 Degrees come play basketball against us, the DJs, against you guys.
That's right.
And I think, was it Dream? I don't remember. This was 2001. but it was us and you guys. We were playing you guys, and I think Dream, the girl band, was on our side.
It could have
And
been Dream, yeah.
and so we're at a high school gym, packed house. I'm playing basketball against 98 degrees, and I walked in there. I wanted to be like Harlem Globetrotters. Let's have some fun. You guys, very competitive. You
Yeah.
destroyed us.
We are very competitive. It's funny, out of all of us, I'm the only one that actually played organized sports. The other guys went to performing arts school, but they have something to prove. So when we would play, even professional athletes in pickup games, I mean, we were always serious business. We were those guys. Those guys. We're
Yeah.
like the serious guys, right? Instead of like tongue in cheek, fun.
That's what I thought it was going to be.
No, we're body
I
checking people.
You are.
Yeah, exactly.
I think you took me out. I had, dribbling down. Next thing you know, I'm on the ground. I missed my free throws.
Very much like us. Yes, I mean,
it was a fun
even
time.
Rock and Jock for MTV, we were like full contact. I remember knocking Ja Rule down.
Did you really?
People were like, come on, guys. Yeah, we played Drew Hill pickup football in like Sweden or something, and we were like smashing those guys.
Hey, go all in.
A little over the top for us. Yeah.
Now going back to your days back in LA before you officially truly break it outside of James Brown, you said you're working security. I heard a story once. Did you work security at Phil Collins's house?
I
Was
did.
there some connection? Tell me about that.
So when the original group quit, I had made friends with James Brown security guy, and he had contracts with all the clubs in LA: the Whiskey, the Roxy, the Roxbury, the Palace, the Viper Room, and he had Phil Collins's estate, which was being built. He was never there.
Okay.
It was this nice estate in Beverly Hills, but there were 12-hour shifts. So I would work 8 at night till 8 in the morning. Very boring. I couldn't stay in the house. They had this little security hut with a camera, and basically every hour on the hour had cameras all over the estate. I had to get up, walk around the perimeter of the estate so they could see me walk around. In Beverly Hills in a gated community. It wasn't likely that someone was going to come, kidnap me, but really it gave me a lot of time to visualize what I wanted to do with 98 Degrees. I listened to Kiss FM, which was the big radio station. There still is. And, I was like, in the security office writing down my goals. I had 12 hours, a night to write down these goals and visualize and just fantasize about being on the radio and really had no business doing it. If you thought about the reality of the situation, what are the odds that I'm going, a year from now, I'm going to actually have a new group, be signed to a label, be on the radio. But I wrote all those goals down, not to sound corny, and all of them came true, every single one of them a year later. So it was pretty crazy.
It is. Well, okay. So then the original guys, they panic, they bail. How do you come together with Nick and everyone else? How does 90 Degrees then form after that?
That's a great question. In a roundabout way, I met a guy that was an actor in LA, but was from Ohio and actually went to high school with Nick, Drew, and Justin. And for a minute, he joined the group. My brother joined the group. My brother was out there. He was a struggling actor. So it was my brother, this guy, John, who was friends with Nick and Drew and Justin. And then we needed another member. And he's like, you got to hear my guy, Nick, man. You got to hear this guy. He's amazing. And I was dead tired from auditioning people. Either they didn't have the right look, they didn't have the right work ethic, they didn't have the right voice. I mean, LA is not exactly a scene for like pop music. It's like a rock grunge scene.
And this is early 90s we're talking at the time?
Mid 90s, like 95, 96, 95. So I ended up, talking to this guy, John, and he's like, man, I'm telling you, you got to hear this guy. I got a tape of him somewhere. A tape, tape. You remember what tapes are, right? So he brought a tape to my apartment and I played it, and I heard Nick's voice. He was singing in some cover band. I was like, you got it. I didn't know what he looked like. I'm like, whoever this guy is, get this guy on the phone. I needed to talk to him now. So he called him up, and I got on with him. I'm like, look, I've got this group. We were about to get signed, and he's like, all right, yeah, man. And I asked him, I said, hey, man, what's your look? Which is a really, really weird question upon first time. And he's like, he kind of chuckled. He's like, I don't know how to answer that. And I'm like, well, anyway, look, make your way out here. A couple of months later, he drove to LA. He kind of put a pause on college, drove to LA, and I didn't see what Nick looked like till he showed up at the apartment. I mean, I had no idea. You couldn't Google him. You couldn't look him up on Instagram. John didn't have a picture of him. So the first time I saw Nick is when I met him to join the group in LA. So he came out. The guy, John, eventually quit. He wanted to be an actor. My brother, it wasn't for him. And then Nick brought his brother, Drew, and Justin out, and that's how we started 98 Degrees.
I didn't know all this about the whole thing. I thought you guys were like high school friends and stuff. Then so like your brother, what did your brother go on to do?
My brother went on to, start. He raised a family and ended up being a career guy. Ironically, now he's gotten back into acting. He just did an independent film, and it's gotten a lot of accolades. It's in a bunch of film festivals. So he ended up later in life
Yeah,
going and following his dream. But it's a grind. You know what it's like in this business. You've been
yeah.
in it for a long time, so you're one of the warriors in this business in any facet. Whether you're in media, on the radio, an actor, a singer, it's a grind. It's competitive. It's hard like any job, but it's a fickle business. And it's not for everybody. It's not for the faint of heart. You get a lot of rejection, and I'm not saying that that's why he left the business. I think he wanted to be a family man and get into some other things, but he circled back and is now having success as an actor.
Oh, that's awesome. Do
Yeah,
you
it's awesome.
remember where you were the first time? So you start to make it, you get signed, you're Canada, you're making the thing. Do you remember the first time you heard your first song on the radio and where you were and what
You know,
station?
I don't know whether it was the first time, but I think it was the most impactful time.
Mhm.
Was we had gotten signed in LA, and then we were required to move to New York where Motown was. They had headquarters in LA, but then they their big headquarters was in New York City. So we drove back across the country, lived in New York. And, I think the very first time that it really made an impact was our first single, Invisible Man, was out. I was in LA. We were staying at like this little boutique hotel where all the industry guys stay called the La Montrose. And we pulled up and it came on the radio on Kiss FM. And remember, a year and a half before that, I was in that security booth listening to Kiss FM all night long. And so
Yeah.
I just sat there, we pulled up and the guy came out and we were like, no, wait, give us a minute, cranked it up. And we heard it. I think Justin was in the car with me, and we just were like, man, can you believe this? It's on the radio,
Yeah.
and so that's kind of when it hit me hard. There have been many, many moments where it hits you, and you're like, wow, we're on our way. It's never we made it though. For us, we were always type A kind of guys, always on to the next goal, the next, the next plateau. But it was always we're on our way, right? We're on our way.
Uh-huh.
We heard it on the radio. We're on our way.
Did you go when your first album came out? Did you go to the store and actually buy a physical copy of it? Did
Oh
you
my
walk in the
God.
store and buy a CD?
Yeah, we did that. Oh, we had to do that. So when our first album came out, like I said, they didn't really do a whole lot of marketing and promotion. In fact, when the single came out, and this isn't how it used to be. When the single came out, the album dropped the same day. So
Mhm.
there was no lead time. Usually you have a single out, you give a little more lead time, you have a second single out, maybe a third single, then you drop the album. Our label just put it all out at once. So people got a dose of us right away, but they didn't really know what we looked like. Our video wasn't on MTV. TRL hadn't emerged yet.
Oh
So
yeah,
here we
uh-huh.
are, going and telling people, hey, we're the guys that are singing Invisible Man, like literally trying to get people's attention. And, going into stores like Camelot, record stores like Camelot or FYE or Sam Goody or
Sam
Strawberry.
Goody, yeah, uh-huh.
Yeah, and trying to find our record. A lot of times we couldn't even find it. So we were looking through the bins and trying to find the record. If I'd find one, we'd buy it. We're like, let's buy it. We got to make it on the chart somehow. And no matter how many of those we were buying and we would find, we still we're kind of toiling and barely bubbling under on the album sales charts. It was a very, very tough time for us because we knew we had some momentum. I don't know whether the label just had too many people and too many priorities to get behind us, but we had to kind of fend for ourselves and try to continue to make noise, think outside of the box on ways we could promote ourselves.
I love the self-promotion, you guys. But when you would buy that CD, would you walk up and be like, hey,
Of course we did. We're like, hey, recognize that? Oh, yes, of course. I mean, when you're that young and you're trying to be cool, we even had our posters. So we would go into the record stores and be like, here's our posters. You're selling our record. They'd kick us out a lot of times. Get out of here. No, our album's here. I promise you. So it was a really interesting time. And then once we got on TRL, it was a whole different story. Right?
yeah, I was gonna say, I know you guys are always trying to achieve more, but when at that point did you realize that, okay, this thing is clicking, we're off to the races, here we go? Was there a certain moment that you guys knew
Yeah,
like we've got something?
Yeah, I mean, our first album didn't really do much, although we had a hit single on there. The president of the label, who was really, really great, he passed away a couple years ago. Andre Harrell, he's a legend in the business. He had started Uptown and was responsible for the careers of Mary J. Blige and Al B. Sure and Jodeci. He's the one who signed us, but Motown hadn't had any success, so they let him go. They brought in another president who was actually a movie guy named
Okay.
George Jackson, a movie producer. He produced New Jack City and some other films. TRL then emerged in between our albums. So, Backstreet ended up starting to blow up, being on Total Request Live on MTV. So did NSYNC. And he basically goes, well, we've got our own version of that. Like, get in the studio, make an album, we'll get behind it. And once we released some music and made it onto TRL, it was a wrap. Like, when you go into Times Square and the whole block is shut down and you've got fans with signs and people are screaming and you literally cannot get out of your tour bus or your vehicle that you're in. And then getting up there, being in that studio after watching it on TV a year before that, it's pretty surreal. And that's when we started to go, oh man, we're starting to get there. It's starting to catch on.
Was there ever a song that you guys that you didn't want to do that
Oh,
someone either wrote or like, I don't know if it's gonna work, and then you're like, thank God we did that one.
well, yeah. Oh, and thank God we did that one. Yeah, I think it's the hardest thing. We had been grinding on the album, putting the second album together fairly quickly, and we had a good A&R, but we did a lot of our own A&Ring. We did writing, but they wouldn't let any of the songs we wrote, become singles because they just didn't trust that, right? So
Okay, yeah.
we had a ton of good songwriters, a ton of good producers, and we were pretty done recording. I mean, we had been grinding for about 3 months straight trying to get this album together and quickly. And the label was like, you still need one more song. And I remember, they had passed us the demo of The Hardest Thing, and not all of us loved it. A lot of the guys, collectively, we didn't like it as a song. And, we had passed it around. I think our girlfriends had listened to it and they were like, oh, we like that song. So we ended up reluctantly recording that song. It was the last song we recorded. And literally, we had a very short break before we had to go back on the road to promote it. So after we recorded it, everybody went their separate ways for 3 or 4 days
Yeah.
because that was our big break. That was our big
Yeah,
break over the
3-day
course of a
break,
couple days. Yeah, and then we went back and heard it, and we all kind of were like, man, this sounds pretty good. And it ended up actually at that time. I know I Do ended up being the song that's probably we're best known for now because it's a wedding song, but Hardest Thing had the best reaction and actually was a catalyst for selling a lot of records.
Wow.
And so it ended up being probably our biggest song at that time.
Well, was there one that you then on the flip side that you passed on and you wish you would have grabbed?
Well, no, I mean there were some opportunities to collaborate that we passed on. One of
Okay,
them
like
being Nelly. So so there
you
was this
did.
emerging artist named Nelly, and they had talked about us maybe collaborating with him, and we couldn't find time to get off the road and record with him. It wasn't that we didn't want to do it. We
Uh-huh.
just were like, well, we're on the road. What are we going to do? Fly in and record. And of course, Country Grammar comes out after
Yeah,
that.
right.
He
Yeah.
explodes, and we're like, maybe we should have made time to do the collaboration with
Right?
Nelly. Yeah, I mean, we had a couple of those.
Yeah, you don't know at the time.
No, you never know. You
I,
never know.
I want to talk about I made some notes of some things that may have happened with fans. And you tell me if these are true or not. Crazy
Okay,
stories. Like
love it.
is it true that a girl once snuck into your room through a room service cart?
Absolutely. That happened a number of times. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. It happened a couple times. So we were in the Philippines the first time it happened, and we're staying in this luxury 5-star hotel, living it up. And I think I ordered eggs or something from room service, and I'm sitting there, in my skivvies and no shirt and smashing eggs and bacon, and out pops a fan
No,
from
really?
under the cart. Yeah. I'm like, whoa, what's going on here? And they're very serious about security in the Philippines. They have a guy posted outside of everybody's door.
Yeah.
That's on the staff. It's an amazing place, a great culture, and they really take take care of you there. And the guy heard me scream, sir, is everything okay? I'm like, there's a girl in here under my food court. He walks in and he's like, miss, you must go. It happened a couple times. We had girls sneak into our tour bus. We had some pretty crazy stuff happen.
But the girl that's in the food service cart is the person that's wheeling her in on it. Aren't they going to feel like, oh, this cart feels 110 pounds heavier?
I tend to think yes, but we didn't want anybody to get in trouble. A
Yeah.
lot of times, and this may be on your list, but a lot of times girls would back then would get tip the concierge at various hotels, right? They would
Mm.
go if we were in New York, they knew that the boy band or guys or pop stars would stay at certain hotels, so they'd go to all of them, tip the concierge, and the concierge would say, "Yeah, they're going to be here tonight at 9 o'clock." They'd be there. We're like, how do they know? How do they know? Right? We'd show up and they'd be packed in the lobby. And, that was, so I'm under the impression, I think that they were in on it. I mean, I can't see how you'd be pushing the cart. And
Yeah,
not
exactly.
know. Yeah. Wow. These eggs are really heavy.
Did you guys use an alias when you stayed in hotel rooms?
We did. Yes. So my alias for a long time was Fred Smalls was my alias, because we had this security guy who was Mark Wahlberg's Marky Mark security guy for a while, then became ours. Big, huge, muscular, scary looking dude, and his name was Boom. Right. So his name was a security guy named Boom, shaved head, jacked. This guy, we'd hear, like, in the middle of the night, I'd hear, panting in the hallway. This guy's like doing burpees and ladders in the hallway of the hotel. He's that serious, right? Boom. And I remember we were in West Virginia, and he had gone to college in West Virginia. We were doing a big state fair, and we pull up, and the cop is like, escorting us in, and walks up to the window, and Boom's in the passenger side, and he's like, "Are you the security?" And Boom says, "Yeah." And he goes, "Freddie Smalls," right? And we're like, he recognized him, right?
No.
And I said, "Wait a minute, there's no way this guy's name is Fred Smalls."
Frederick
Freddie
Smalls.
Smalls. Yeah, he goes, "Freddie Smalls." So from that day on, I was like, that was my alias wherever we went. Fred
That's
Smalls.
fantastic.
Yeah.
When my wife and I got married, we got married at the Wynn, and the night before we stayed in separate rooms and everything, and they're really nice rooms. You got like a suite package and everything. And my wife didn't want family members tracking her down. So it was a whole thing. So she used an alias. And instead of doing like a made up name, she used the name Jessica Simpson. So my wife was staying in a suite at the Wynn for 2 nights under the name Jessica Simpson. And she would call down to the front desk for something. And she's like, they would send like 5 people up for room service. I needed something. They would send like
what a brilliant idea.
3 maids. And I'm like, wow, this. And then we're like, wait a second. You're staying in a suite under the name Jessica Simpson. They think you're Jessica Simpson.
Here's your complimentary champagne. Can we get you some flowers?
Exactly.
Like, what a great idea. I love it.
Flip it. Man,
It's so smart.
I got about 10 minutes left with you, but I do want to get into what are you working on now? What's next for Jeff Timmons? You guys, I feel like you're still out there doing music. What's next? What are you doing right now?
I appreciate you asking. Yeah, I mean, we're about to go to Southeast Asia for the first time in a long time. We haven't done a proper tour there ever. It's always been promotional tours. So I had gone there by myself and had some success without the group, but not nearly as much as we're going to have when we go back. So we're planning on hitting Southeast Asia here in May. We're going to do Canada for the first time in a long time. 2 of the places we broke first. That's going to be June, July. And then we may do something at Christmas time. We may not. I'm not sure. But we have an album that's coming out where we recorded all of our masters like Taylor Swift did, so we could own them.
Okay.
So we have 5 re-records that sound exactly like the originals that we can now own and control, and then we have 5 of the classics on there. So it's called Full Circle. It'll be out May 9th. The label partners out of Canada, XO Entertainment. So that's coming out. And I also just launched something called Wiggle Room at the Lowe's Hotel, Penthouse Suite at the Lowe's Hotel, which is this really intimate kind of show setting where it's a VIP experience. We only sell 60 to 80 tickets.
Really? Okay.
Comedians go in there, magicians, mentalists, musicians. We have like a true crime detective guy going in there. We launched that about 2 weeks ago. Both nights got sold out. It's easy to sell out 60 tickets, right? But you have something like that coming April 19th as well. So I'll check that out in Hollywood.
So where's it's called the Wiggle Room, and where's this happening?
At the Lowe's Hotel Hollywood, the Penthouse Suite. It's called the Panoramic Suite, one of the best views and best kept secrets in LA. It's this gorgeous penthouse suite there, has like a 180-degree view of Hollywood. You see the Hollywood sign there. It's a really great landscape and a really cool, intimate environment. We serve drinks, we have a master chef that comes up there and cooks food. It's really, really cool.
Is that do they have a rooftop pool?
They do not have a rooftop pool. No, they should. They should, but
throw one in there.
Yeah.
Let's talk about TV shows. When you guys, the height of your career, were you doing the late night circuit? Were you doing all that? I know you did TRL, but were you doing Leno? Were you doing Letterman? Were you doing the late night circuit?
Well, yeah, look, we did Leno and the Tonight Show probably a half dozen times, if not more. I mean, the first time we performed on there was for a Disney soundtrack song that we did for Mulan with Stevie Wonder. So talk about
Wow.
nerves. So yeah, I was super nervous for that one too. Our first time on the Tonight Show with Stevie Wonder for Disney. It was a lot, but he's a pro. It was like a dream working with Stevie Wonder. He was the most down to earth, talented guy. So he made it really comfortable for us. And traditionally, new acts don't get to sit down on the couch and talk with Jay Leno. But Stevie insisted that if he's going to sit down and talk with Jay, we got to be with him. So he gave us that first little break and that opportunity. And you need those kinds of people championing you when you're in a business like this. So we'll
Oh
never
yeah,
forget that.
that's huge. How do you stay in great shape
I do what you do. Obviously, eat no food for both of us, right? So
and
yeah,
drink
I do.
C4?
That's it. See, well, I mean, I'd have a heart attack if I drank that. I don't know how you're doing that one, but yeah, I just do low carb. I've been on a low carb diet for about 20 years. I started on Atkins diet about almost 30 years ago and just stayed on it. I got on it for health reasons. I was pre-diabetic and hypoglycemic and didn't know what was going on. Went to a doctor, took a glucose tolerance test where you drink this sugary drink over 6 hours and they test your blood sugar. And he said, hey, if you stay on the path you're on with the food you're eating, you're going to be a diabetic. So he put me on this low carb Atkins diet, which is now evolved into the keto diet, and I stayed on it for years. It helps me physically, mentally, emotionally, and look, it keeps you in shape too. That's the bonus.
I feel like you're always been in great shape. I don't feel like I feel like any photos I see of you throughout the years going back 5, 10, 15, 20, you're always in fantastic shape.
I try to. I don't want my wife to leave me, so I try to do the best. I try to.
People are like, why do you work out?
I compete with the landscapers and the pool guy out here.
Oh my God, my pool guy
I,
is a stud.
I'm like, yeah, get this guy out of here.
Who is this guy? Get him out of here.
We need a pool woman instead of a
Yes,
pool guy.
exactly. Have you? We were working on a book. Did that book ever come out?
No, I started working on the book, right? And one of the things that when you write a book in Hollywood, I wanted to write a book about my experiences and wanted to be an inspirational and motivational book, right? And they wanted it to be a salacious book. So they wanted it to be
Yeah.
about all the dirt of people that are my peer group and girls and groupies. And while that probably is better for sales of the book, I figured I better not do that. I don't want to embarrass myself or embarrass other people, get
Yeah.
blackballed from the business. So I'll hold off on the book. So
You were talking about performing with Stevie Wonder. The Michael Jackson tribute show was it his anniversary? Was he there? Did you perform with Michael or in front of Michael?
we performed for Michael at his 25th anniversary special. It was on VH1. That was September 10th, 2001 in New York City. And as you can imagine, the next day was September 11th.
That's when.
So we
That's
filmed
when
that.
you recorded the night before.
Yeah, we filmed it the night before, and look, it was a star-studded cast. Obviously, Destiny's Child was there, and Whitney Houston, and Michael was in the audience, and we performed with Usher and Luther Vandross, which was amazing. Those guys are legends, and Usher was just starting to become a superstar, and obviously Luther's incredible.
Yeah.
But it was a great experience. It was cool because my mom got to fly in and see that and be a part of that. But yes, September 11th was the next day, and that's when we shut down the group and didn't get back together after that for about 11 years. So
Really?
yeah, we were finishing up a massive tour. We had been on the road for 5 years. And we had a couple dates left, but at that time, you didn't know what was going to happen. If it was going to be a war, I mean, nobody knew what the climate was after something like that. We all just wanted to go home. I had a little baby at the time and one on the way, and so we all kind of just went home and we never got back together. We all just did our own things. So it wasn't a breakup that we didn't like each other anymore. Everybody just it sort of separated us. We all kind of were burnt out a little bit and started doing our own thing.
Going into that night, though, you didn't know. Going into that night, you still plan on being a band the following week. It just kind of happened naturally.
We still had 2 or 3 shows left on the docket, but after that, you didn't know what was going to happen in the world. And of course, everything changed in the world after that day.
What was that like for you in New York City and getting out the next day? Did you get that night? Were you in the city the next day?
It was crazy. Yeah, I mean, and look, cell phones didn't work. The payphones didn't work. You couldn't call anybody. I literally turned on my TV. I answered the phone, and it was my sister in my hotel room. And she said, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" And I was like, "What are you talking about?" She said, "Turn on the TV." I turned on the TV, and saw the second plane hit the tower,
Gosh,
and
yeah.
I was like, whoa, what's going on? It was so surreal. And the phone went dead. And then I tried to call my family, couldn't call, and nobody could get out. You walk outside and soot is everywhere. People are
Holy
walking around in a
cow.
daze. And it was really, really crazy. You know, New York, with the energy that people have and how fast paced it is, it was almost like everything was in slow motion.
So I didn't realize you were in New York City then when the whole thing went down. How'd you guys get out of
Yeah.
the city? Did you have to drive out or
Well, it was interesting. I mean, I believe that Nick and Drew were able to get a flight out. We couldn't get out, and
these
so
flights were grounded? You couldn't fly. Planes were grounded.
you couldn't get out, and we ended up getting on our tour bus and driving out of there and driving to where we lived and getting dropped off by our tour bus.
And where
So
was that?
California.
So
Yeah,
you
I was in
guys drove across
California
the
at the
country?
time. Yeah, well, everybody lived in different places. So a couple of guys got dropped off in Cincinnati, and I got dropped off in LA.
That's why the band broke up afterwards. You guys were on a tour bus across the country. You're like, I can't be with you guys.
That was it. Especially, especially after being on the road for so many years.
Yeah.
We had pretty much been on the road for about 5 years straight.
Yeah. But just as you get ready to wrap up, I find that fascinating. How was that ride across the country? I mean, everything's happening. You got to make all these stops. It must have been quite the trip.
It was scary. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, look, the going through Pennsylvania, and the turnpike was shut down, and then there were bomb threats everywhere. Look, copycats were giving bomb threats, and it was a mess. It was crazy. You didn't know what was going to happen. All I wanted to do was get home get to be with my family.
Yeah.
At that time.
When did you move to Vegas?
About 15 years ago now.
Yeah.
So I've been here for about 15 years. I love it. I'm a Vegas local now. I've embraced it. I lived in LA. I came here to host a show, and then fell in love with Vegas and never went back. I just had sent for my stuff. I didn't even move my stuff out.
Really?
I sent for it. Yeah.
And
That's how much I love it here.
The Men of the Strip show you were doing?
No, it was Chippendales. I hosted Chippendales. Yeah, I reluctantly hosted Chippendales and fell in love with that show. I had so much fun with those guys, and it ended up that seemed to be the catalyst for getting 98 Degrees back together. We all were doing different things, and that got a lot of press and promotion, and we ended up getting back together. So
awesome, dude. Jeff, that's 42 minutes right there. You and I chit-chatting this morning.
I run my mouth, JC. I mean, we could be here for hours. So
dude, I got notes. I got so many things I want to talk to you about, but I got to wrap it up here, man. I didn't know so much stuff about you. I just learned so much about you, Jeff Timmons. So thank you for sharing your time with us, and I really appreciate it, man. And I appreciate your friendship too.
Oh, dude, likewise. You're one of the great ones, man. I'm so happy to see your success throughout the years. You're a worker. You're a good friend as well, and continued success to you, man. Thanks for having me on and covering all my stuff. I appreciate it.
All right, man. I'll talk to you soon.
See you soon,
Jeff.
man. Thank you
for watching.
Bye.